Beyond Capitalism and Communism. Hello, everybody. Today, I want to talk about this topic again and kind of give you my perspective for real this time. So, after watching a lot of this on YouTube with videos, um, communism, capitalism, there's, and I don't know if this is like because of the algorithms on YouTube, but I get a lot of suggestions into like the communism, Marxist videos, right? And Jordan Peterson, I listen to Jordan Peterson a lot, and this is something that he has used and he has talked about. I say used because he has used it to define the left, right? The social justice warriors that are nowadays on the news, on social media, right? So, well, let's start with this. I think there are two types of communism. There's an old Marxism, which I think is what a lot of people that are into Marx tend to say is the real essence of Marxism. And I'm going to get into this a little bit also, but if you're not a communist, if you're not a Marxist, um, according to Marxists and communists, you don't understand communism or Marxism. You need to basically be one to understand it, I think. Um, I'm neither for or nor against. I'm just kind of a spectator. Um, but I see that there's this old Marxism, right, where it's like, like what the essence of Marx, and then there's a modern day interpretation of Marxism or of communism, which is, you could say, used for the counter culture movements. So this means that there are people that are maybe, well, people will say that other people, like the social justice warriors, are using communist ideologies, which basically talk about a class struggle, right? And this is where a lot of people get in trouble because they will say it's not only about class struggle, it's not only about this. Okay, it could be about many other things that we're not considering, but let's just say that that part about the class struggle, the poor versus the rich, like women versus men, African American versus white people, right? Like that type of struggle is very characteristic of Marxism, which is basically the employer versus the employee, right? Um, so that is in there, but yeah, we could have a limited vision of Marxism and communism, and there's more to it, right? So yeah, two types of Marxism: old Marxism, the essence, and then this like superficial interpretation which people give it nowadays. Okay, so I was recently informed, thanks to YouTube, of this debate that happened. I guess there was a debate a couple years back between Foucault, this philosopher, and Chomsky, also a philosopher, where they debated nature versus nurture. And that's actually a debate I really like, that I really got into when I was at the university. Now, this debate was between Jordan Peterson and Slavoj Zizek. I may not pronounce his name correctly. I think he's Eastern European. But I hadn't heard about him until this debate, right? And the debate is about like 2-3 hours long. I don't think it's the whole debate because you could kind of tell that there are parts that are cut. But what I saw, because I also saw like videos talking about the debate, and they were basically destroying Jordan Peterson, right? They were saying that Jordan Peterson wasn't prepared, he didn't understand Marxism, he didn't understand communism. Zizek even said that he wasn't really communist, that he was more of a Engels type of guy. But we know that like the Communist Manifesto, for example, was written by Marx and Engels, and Marx was influenced by Engels and vice versa, right? So um, I felt like the debate, well, the structure of the debate more or less goes: Jordan Peterson starts the debate was happiness to start, right? So and the mediator, the moderator, he kept bringing up the topic of happiness, and both Peterson and Zizek were kind of like, whatever, dude, happiness isn't even real, right? Like that shouldn't even be like a goal. They were both kind of pessimistic about happiness, but we're going to see why happiness is actually a very important topic in capitalism, right? So they focused on communism. Well, Jordan Peterson focused on his interpretation, which is this um modern day interpretation of of communism, and he was talking about it. He was saying how there were like contradictions, things, how things didn't really make sense, and then people came out defending communism, Marxism, saying he didn't understand it, right? He was ill prepared, and this wasn't only like the YouTube community. This was the people in the crowd in the debate that were at the debate present. You could hear how when Zizek would say something or challenge Peterson, they would go crazy. They would applaud. They would, and people, when Peterson sometimes, when he was talking about certain things, people would kind of like laugh, or like yell some shit. I don't know. But this leads me to believe that that debate wasn't really like people weren't really interested in the content. They were more interested in what, the hype. Like, and Zizek, I gotta say this about Zizek. Zizek was unstoppable. I'm obviously biased towards Peterson, but I gotta admit, Zizek was relentless. He was very energetic, and this may be due to his zodiac sign. He's an Aries. He's the first zodiac sign of the zodiac, and Jordan Peterson is a Gemini, so he's very verbal, Peterson. But Zizek is all firepower, right? Like the god of war. So he just went in there and he just started, pa 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 pa. And also he spoke very fast, right? Like his ideas were just bam 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 bam. And Peterson, he talks a lot too, but he tries to think before he speaks. And Zizek was just talking, right? Like crazy. And people love that, right? Now you may say, well, there's rhetoric and there's logic. Were Zizek's arguments rhetorical? Did they hype people up? Did they appeal to emotion? Right? Yeah. But were they logical? Right? Like if we were to really analyze there's this part that where like I clearly saw that how he contradicts himself, which is actually one of the parts where he says, where are all these modern day communists that you talk about, right? And or I don't remember if it's that part, but he's challenging Peterson, right? He challenges Peterson head on many times in the debate. The debate starts off very courteous, very civilized, right? Where they kind of like even try to avoid each other to a certain extent. But then there's just a moment where Zizek's just like boom, like directly, like fuck you, Peterson, basically, and like he says something along the lines like, he talks about this hyper moralization, and before he says that, he says something about how he sees how people nowadays are just hyper moralized, but it's not about changing the social structure of society, right? And I'm like, no, it is about changing the social structure of society. They're trying to change society. They're hyper moralized, but they're trying to change society, which is what Marxism is about, which is what communism is about, right? I felt I thought a lot of things during the debate. I watched the whole thing. Like parts here and there, but like I watched the whole thing completely, in the course of a couple days, spread out across a couple days. But okay, so back to the debate. The crowd was pleased, right? And they said Jordan Peterson wasn't prepared, which I think may be true. There was this other video that talked about how he may have chosen the Communist Manifesto, which was actually written for workers to understand. So it's very simplified. It's, it doesn't have the essence. And they just kept talking about that, the critics and also Zizek, how Peterson was missing the point, how he didn't really understand communism, Marxism, which I think is kind of a stupid argument. If you go back to some of the videos that I've made, I've talked about this, how you can get stuck in a debate when you ask a person to define something, right? And it doesn't, if I say we're having an argument about something, and then I just say, you know what, you don't understand this. You don't understand the essence. You completely disarm the other person. What's anything the other person says is not good enough because according to you, they don't understand, which I thought about some ways you could get around that, like asking, then you explain it to me, right? Then you tell me what I'm missing, because people will say that Jordan Peterson didn't understand the essence of communism, but they can't even explain the essence of communism, right? Because anything you say about it, communism is kind of, it's a reaction to capitalism. So it's trying to destroy the structure to a certain extent, right? Which the crowd was they were ecstatic about that when Peterson said something about, it's trying to destroy the structure, it's trying to not have institutions, trying to not have any categorization, right? Almost like anarchism. So they said Peterson wasn't informed, yet the left-wing people represent the Marxist revolutionary ideals, right? Which things get confusing when we start talking about politics, because then we say left-wing, liberals, democracy, and then right-wing also talks about democracy. Everybody's for democracy, but how did democracy even come about, right? The evolution of the ideals that favor the class struggle or the hierarchical struggle across time. So Marxism may not only be that, but it has become a symbol of that. Marxism has become a symbol of the class struggle, of any type of social struggle. Marxism is a symbol, right? El Che Guevara, for example, in Cuba, right? It's like revolution. You want a revolution for whatever you want, right? You want a revolution for shoes, for race, for whatever. If you want a revolution, Marxism comes into your head. It's a symbol. So maybe the Marxists don't want to be, connected to that. They say those aren't our causes. Marxism was for workers, right? Okay, but it has become a symbol. You can't argue that. It has become a symbol, and that's where people are kind of coming from, and that's where people say, well, you're wrong because you don't understand the essence, whatever. So then there's this moral argument of good, right? Which Peterson makes, which this other guy, I think on Wisecrack, he says that Peterson gets all confused in there. I don't think he got confused. The moral argument of the good, the moral argument basically says that the workers, the lower class, the poor, the oppressed are good, and the oppressors, the upper class, the rich, the oppressors are bad, right? And I think they say, well, no, Marxism doesn't say that at all. But again, it's a symbol. It's there may be good rich people and bad poor people, right? Which we all know it's more nuanced than that. It's not that clear cut, like good, bad, rich, poor, right? It's more complicated than that. But that argument, I think, has become an argument because of our nature, right? It's easy for us to say that, to categorize the good as the rich as bad and the poor as good morally, right? So it's funny that people can debate Marx and communism, but the opposite of this is never really clear. Now, this was really interesting to me because, I've been hearing on YouTube videos Marxism, Marxism, communism, communism, and if I like to read, and I consider myself an intellectual of some sort, and you come across a lot of Marxism, right? Like memes and this type of shit on Facebook too. And it's funny because like here, for example, in this debate, they never once mentioned like Adam Smith or capitalism, but like the people, the ideas of capitalism, right? So I was like, what the fuck, like at the end of the day, it's free publicity for Marxism and communism, right? Which is like, you get a ton of these videos, you get a ton of like, okay, communism, Marxism, but it's like capitalism, and you can almost hear like, you know like the silence, because it's like, who who are the the philosophers of capitalism, right? Like I mentioned in the other video, it's like capitalism was first practiced and then it was theorized, and Marxism was first theorized and then put into practice, right? So yeah, at the end of the day, it's free publicity for Marxism and communism, which is ultimately a call for a better world and life by being fair, right? And assuring not only equality but equity and justice for all, right? So it's like Marx, and Marx was a Taurus. I'm a Taurus, so I kind of understand where he's coming from. He looks at, like the labor, the distribution of labor, and he says, this is not good. This is fucked up, because the people at the bottom, the workers, the employees, they're suffering, and the employers, the people at the top, they're getting rich. What the fuck? Power to the people. And it's like, yeah, man, that's cool and all, but that's kind of where we get like into trouble sometimes with. Okay, well, let's go to this part, because this is what I wanted to talk about. Adam Smith and happiness. and so then I started looking up videos on who talks about capitalism. And then I came across Adam Smith, and I was like, okay, Adam Smith, who the fuck was he, right? Maybe I've heard of him here and there. So his ideas were, like, and it's kind of interesting to look at like John Locke or Adam Smith, or like these capitalists, right? Or like pre-capitalists like John Locke. And, they like, the first thing they do is like, they're actually critics of capitalism to a certain extent, right? They're not like Marx, because Marx is like, he rejects it and he's like, we should change it. And the capitalists, they're more like, we got this system in place, it exists, let's improve it, right? They try to improve it. So they're the ones that ask themselves the question of happiness, which was the main, it was the fucking headline for the debate between Peterson and Zizek. Happiness. And they just kind of like, they didn't even really talk about happiness. And Adam Smith, like right off the bat, he's like, does wealth mean happiness? It's like, okay, we have production, we got people working, we got people getting rich, okay, they're living a better life, but does wealth mean happiness, right? That's an Adam Smith question. It's very interesting, right? That a capitalist, it's like, let's talk about the capitalists too. What were they thinking? What were they asking themselves? So he comes up with a specialized theory, which basically divides the work between the individuals, so that each individual can specialize in a certain area. So the way this goes is, you have a person that does something, that produces something like shoes or pants or whatever, and you have one person doing all the jobs, all the sub activities that need to be done in order to get that thing done, right? So it takes a long ass time. So then the specialized theory, basically what it says is, okay, let's break this down into the sub activities, and let's hire a person to do each sub activity, right? So if there are 8 things you need to do to make shoes, you don't have one person doing the 8 activities, you have 8 people doing each activity. So this will make, production speed up, and people will get shit done faster, right? um, so, and it was funny because I was watching the video, and they said, yeah, like back in the day, this was like the thing, like everybody was psyched about it. We now know that this type of work demoralizes people, and it makes you even question the meaning of your job, right? Like, what, like, you go into work, you do this one little activity, you're specialized in it, in this big factory, in this big company, and you don't really get to see, your work. You may just put the laces on the shoes or whatever, right? And but you don't have meaning, you don't have happiness, right? So yeah, he talked about the purpose, the role, and the dignity of the individual, which were to be taken into consideration. Provide to the poor by being rich, and honor the rich. So it was interesting because he says, well, okay, the rich need something, and it's not money because they have money. So in order for them to help the poor, they're going to need, like, libraries named after them, statues, hospitals named after them, or whatever, right? So they can help the poor by them being honored, because what they really want once they have money is like attention, right? Like they need their ego fed. So you elevate the quality of consumer demand by educating the consumer, right? Help yourself. This is the ideology of the airplane, where they say, well, if an airplane is falling down or whatever, you need to put your gas masks or your oxygen masks. You need to help yourself first. You need to put on your oxygen mask first before you can help other people, right? Which is like the right wing ideology, right? The conservatives. So this was very interesting because, the people are always talking about the quality of the things, right? That I'm going to buy. But he says we need to elevate the quality of the consumer demand. So the consumer needs to be smart. The consumer's needs or demands need to be, they need to have quality, right? You need to know what you want, and you also need those things, right? Which basically, like, you need to be educated about what you want. You can't just, oh, now I got money, I'm gonna spend it all on all these, like, things that I don't even need. So then we have the labor theory of value, which says value is not determined by labor, but by consumers' perception of value. This is Adam Smith. This is before Karl Marx. He had a labor theory of value, which basically said that the value of something is not in the labor, right? But in the consumer's perception of labor. So it's how you perceive value, right? And perfect examples nowadays, like Starbucks, iPhones, right? Where the brand, where what you perceive as valuable influences the way you consume things, the way you purchase, or whatever, right? And then Marx basically said, no, bro, like, it's not the perception of the consumer, it's the labor. The labor is what has value, right? Which is kind of funny because, Adam Smith said this before Marx did, and then Marx takes this argument and just says, no, you're wrong. It is labor. It's not the consumer's perception of value, right? Now we also have John Locke. John Locke, he was more like a humanitarian, I think. He would talk about, like, religious tolerance, the separation of church and state, which was also very radical for his time. But he's considered the father of liberalism, which we could say it's left wing. But if he is part of the capitalists, he would be more of a conservative, more of a right wing. But we got to remember that what seemed radical in the past eventually turns traditional and becomes right wing, right? And then when it's right wing, there are new oppositions, there are new liberals with new ideas, right? Because that's what the left is about. It's about new ideas, like constant change, right? So new ideas come up, they become stabilized, and then they go to the right, right? And then there are new ideas again, right? This is just a fucking cycle. So anyway, for his time, he was a liberal, which nowadays he would be considered like a capitalist, right? And he would be right wing. Because he spoke about the natural rights, the natural right of life, the natural right of liberty, and the natural right of property, which was his theory of property. And in the theory of property, well, we all know that the right wing is all about private property, right? And yeah, he basically, I guess his ideas were like pre American revolutionary ideas, right? Like the American Revolution, the founding fathers, they based themselves on John Locke a lot, which was considered Jeffersonian democracy from Thomas Jefferson, and Locke's thinking, which was basically summarized in every man should only have what he can use for productive purposes, right? So you shouldn't have more than what you need or what you need to be productive, right? Like you should also limit yourself, right? Like be responsible, don't fucking go all out, man. So John Locke could see capitalism, right? So again, he was a visionary here, like Nietzsche. He already foresaw what was coming before it was happening. And this relationship, like I mentioned, between the employer and the employee. So he develops the property theory of economics, or value. And for this, we gotta kind of understand where we're coming from. We're coming from feudalism. We're coming from a religious mental schema of people. People believed in the church. People believed in their king, right? They were subjugated to this, right? We can even go back to like the Roman Empire and the empires before that, and see how people came from that type of ideology where they were just subordinate to the like in the pyramid, to the peak, right? To the king, to the god. And so we go from that to this type of more industrialized, right, with the Industrial Revolution, to working productivity. Now we got to focus on work, on production, and not only at a local scale, but now at a massive scale, right? Like national, international, worldwide, right? Worldwide production of and that's where we're coming from. That's where all these ideas were developed, right? So improving productivity, more division of labor, which would equal more inequality, right? And that's a problem because people suffer, and people get rich, and people get poor, and we don't want that, right? We want things to be fair, which I think this is where a lot of the communism and Marxism comes in, because nowadays we're pushing for that. We're pushing for equality, right? And I don't think it's bad. But so Marx, capitalism subordinates the individual, which is his labor theory of value, and there's a surplus. The surplus is it's like the extra, right, that the employer makes, and this should be given to the workers, right? And this should be given to the workers as they start to displace their bosses. And we can see this nowadays because everybody's ambition, common man, average people, want to have a business. They want to be their own bosses. They want to, have that surplus for themselves, right? They want to displace their bosses because they want to be their own boss, right? Which I don't think is good. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. It's happening, right? It's where we're at. People are being productive, and they're looking for ways to do that by themselves, right? In their own way, to be autonomous, which I think is perfect. It's good. So where does all this lead? Um, okay, Marxism, we could say it's a little bit pessimistic. It criticizes, right? And we could see this with the Zizek Peterson debate. Zizek constantly said he was a pessimist. I can't remember how many times he said that, like probably 10 times. He's like, I'm a pessimistic. Again, my pessimism, right? And yet people don't know how to define it, which was what I was talking about, Marxism. And yeah, like this, they only point out what it's not, right? Um, Jordan Peterson and Slavoj Zizek agreed that happiness should not be a goal, that it's actually not a goal, that it's a sub result of other things, that like meaning and productivity and like all this other stuff. um, and capitalism is a little bit more optimistic in that sense. Capitalism is like the individual responsibility. You could be your own boss basically, which again, a lot of these concepts and terms and ideas kind of start to fade into each other, which I think is kind of like the antithesis, synthesis type of thing. Both try to achieve the same well-being for people, but from different optics. Capitalism from the free market, technical, kind of like colder, logical left hemisphere side, and communism from the more humanitarian, kind of considering the individual. Even though I know wherever communism has been implemented, like North Korea, China, Russia, the Soviet Union, it's not what it is on paper, right? We know that. So I was trying to think about this, and I was trying to come up with something fresh, something new to say, right? Um, because there is good in communism. They both talk about the distribution of work, labor, and I think communism and capitalism, they're the perfect antagonists, right? Like they're fighting each other, whatever. Personally, I always been more interested in the nature versus nurture debate. So the nature versus nurture debate basically asks to consider which was first, nature or nurture. So are you the way you are because that's how you were raised, or because that's how your DNA is, right? And for me, it's nurture, right, which is the social context. And I can win this debate by saying epigenetics, just that, epigenetics, right? Your DNA even adapts to the social context. So, but it's always a debate about the first or the best, right? Like in capitalism and communism, it's a debate about which is the best, right? So they're either quantitative, like numerical or temporal, or qualitative, type of positions that they want to get, the first or the best. So the employer is replacing the boss because the employer can make their own businesses, like I said, and keep their surplus. How will this affect the economy and the social order in the future? For one, we have security, which I think, if we really look back to the past, how when things were really unsafe, they were crazy. I think we live in some safe times, right? Like relatively safe according to history, where shit was madness in the past, right? You can't even argue with that. Shit was crazy. It was out of control. Now we have a more stable society. There are fucked up things, I know that, but it's stable. It's more stable compared to the past, right? Compared to history. So it creates security. You have rights. You have human rights. You have like the police, you have security, you have, relatively speaking, right? I don't want people to be like, oh no, that's not fucking true, like anarchism. It's like, no, bro, we have a relatively stable society, right? To the point where I could say the future is artistic. It's going to be an artistic schema, right? We're not really going to be focusing on gods, because we know that's done. People don't believe in gods. People don't believe in religion. People don't believe in kings. People don't believe in their presidents. People don't believe in work anymore, right? People don't really believe in that distribution of labor, productivity, right? I think what and this is, you can see it all around. It's happening. It's the future is artistic, right? People want art. People want to be entertained. They want to see art. That's social media, man. Experiences. And I'm going to get into why art, why beauty, why aesthetics. People want this, right? And we're seeing it. Another thing to consider is how we went from the religious one king to the labor massive production, and eventually, now to kind of say it, because when you exhaust religious and then the production, what's next? Maybe a combination of both, right? The religious and the production, which is manifested in some type of weird way in the artistic. So beyond, being loyal to the title, beyond communism and beyond capitalism, leaving them behind, we get an artistic, creative society that will need to manage content in the future. Right now there's an explosion of content on social media, on YouTube, on TikTok. It's explosion right now, right? People creating content like crazy, right? People aren't interested in gods, in kings, in work, in labor distribution. They're interested in creating content like this, right? And consuming content, right, from other people. So in the future, we're going to need to learn to organize that. That's for one. So there may be like artistic and creative regulations coming into place. I'm talking maybe like years into the future, right? Like maybe hundreds of years into the future. And we're going to have to learn to live by them. So beauty as a way to achieve a religious experience, right? It's going to appeal to the emotional, very important. So it's going to be like a creative, artistic theory of value. Value is now going to be put 100% in the emotional, right? It's not really going to be logical or reasoning. It's going to be how you feel, how it makes you feel, right? Like very subjective. And this is, of course, with the help of technology. Technology nowadays, is helping us to do this. It's helping us to be artistic, to feel, right? To make others feel. It's helping us to feel, right? And the new ideas and the creations will lead to an emotional world where feeling is always experienced via technology. We can see this with like, the metaverse and, like the Matrix. Like in the future, it's going to be kind of like a Matrix where people are going to be avatars in this type of simulation. That's all aesthetics. That's all beauty. That's all emotion. You want to feel. If you enter those things and you can't feel, it's not even worth it. You're going to want to feel that. You're going to want to experience like, a simulation, like, oh man, that's crazy, right? It's going to be crazy. So all of this via technology with videos, images, art created by other people. Art is technology. Art is a way, is a means. That's what technology means. Anything that exists in this life that is used for human purposes is technology, right? Like a sword, like a pen, like a rock. Like if you use it for something, it's technology. Art is being used to make people feel, right? So people want to feel. So eventually we will have an emotional theory of value, like I said, a creative or artistic theory of value, experience, which will eventually lead people to want to feel anything, right? Like that, since we're coming from all this like ideology, of like, we had kings, gods, we had people working, production, now we have cities, we have shit built, right? So what's next? It's like we want to feel, right? It's kind of like what the rich do when they get rich, right? Like I was talking about money. When you have all the money in the world and you've bought everything you wanted, and we can even say you've experienced everything there is to experience. What else is there left to do? Feel, right? You're going to want to feel more things. You're going to want to create new things of, if you're rich as hell and you've done everything under the sun, and someone says, hey, there's a new so yeah, let's do it. I want to see how it makes me feel, right? I want to experience something new. So this is leading to people's basically to people's lives becoming like a show, right? Like a reality show. So the future is art. However, there's a prediction which would be way into the future. After that, people will want only to come into contact with the real world, right? They will want to be more objective. And again, it's a cycle, right? Like it's a fucked up cycle. Like what would you want after you experience everything there is to experience, right? Maybe you just want to break away from that and just, not feel anything anymore, because that's crazy ass human nature, right? So, yeah, I think all this economic capitalism, communism, they're fusing together. We can all see that they're fusing together. And I think maybe capitalism, like during the Cold War, was really against communism because maybe like we could see how like the Soviet Union, Russia, North Korea, right, China, they went kind of crazy with that, right? Like they became totalitarian states, and maybe the free market countries didn't really want that, but they know that there's some truth in it. So it's kind of like, okay, we kind of synthesize here. There's a little bit of this, there's a little bit of that, there's a little bit of freedom, there's a little bit of regulation, right? And we kind of and we have our life now, which is like I was mentioning, more or less stable, relatively stable, but people want to feel, right? So that's the future. The future is artistic. The future is people creating art for other people, experiencing their own art, experiencing other people's arts, and that's it. That's everything I gotta say for this video. um, so I will see you all next time, and peace out.